Dr. Amelia Grant had always been drawn to the mysteries of the mind. She dedicated her career to understanding the intricacies of sleep, leading to her position as the director of one of the world's most advanced sleep clinics, nestled in a quiet, secluded valley. The clinic, surrounded by towering cliffs and rolling desert dunes, was built to provide rest for the weary, those afflicted by chronic insomnia, night terrors, and sleep disorders no modern medicine could fully cure. It was a sanctuary for the sleepless, or so it seemed. Unbeknownst to Dr. Grant and her team, the clinic stood atop the buried remains of an ancient Egyptian tomb, a final resting place for a long-forgotten pharaoh known as Akhensoutek, a ruler who had been erased from history for his unspeakable cruelty. For thousands of years, his tomb remained sealed beneath the sands, undisturbed. That was until the foundation of the sleep clinic was laid. The first signs of trouble came almost immediately after the clinic opened its doors. Patients who had previously complained of nothing more than restless nights began reporting vivid, disturbing dreams. At first, the dreams seemed unconnected, random flashes of ancient symbols, strange hieroglyphs, and shadowy figures. But as the days passed, the dreams intensified in both frequency and terror. It started with George Coleman, a businessman who had checked into the clinic for insomnia. On his third night, he awoke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding violently. In his dream, he had been wandering through a vast, pitch-black desert under a blood-red sky. The air was thick, suffocating, and in the distance, he saw a figure, a tall, slender man dressed in golden robes, his face obscured by a jackal-headed mask. The figure spoke in a language George didn't understand, but the words echoed in his mind long after he awoke. That night, George had stumbled out of his room, sleepwalking down the clinic's corridors, whispering those same strange words. "Pharaoh Akhensoutek demands your obedience," he muttered over and over again. When Dr. Grant found him, he was standing in front of the clinic's central courtyard fountain, staring blankly into the water. His eyes were wide open, but it was as though he wasn't truly there. "What's happening to me?" George asked, his voice shaking when Dr. Grant snapped him out of his trance. She reassured him that sleepwalking could be a side effect of sleep therapy, but deep down, she felt uneasy. Something about George's behavior struck her as abnormal. Within days, other patients began reporting similar experiences. Cynthia, a young artist who suffered from night terrors, woke up screaming after a dream where she had been mummified alive, her body bound tightly in linen, unable to move or breathe. Her dream was so vivid that she could still feel the constricting pressure around her chest when she awoke. David, a construction worker, described a labyrinthine temple beneath the sands, where torchlit passageways were filled with statues of forgotten gods. At the heart of the temple stood a sarcophagus, sealed with thick, heavy chains. In his dreams, David was always compelled to open it, but each time he did, he would hear a disembodied voice warning him of the consequences. Dr. Grant began documenting these dreams, realizing they all shared common themes: ancient Egypt, pharaohs, tombs, and a presence that lurked in the shadows of their minds. The dreams grew more intense and terrifying with each passing night, and it wasn't long before the patients stopped being able to differentiate between their nightmares and reality. One evening, Dr. Harlan, the clinic's resident neurologist, approached Dr. Grant with a grave expression. He had been monitoring the brainwave activity of the patients during their sleep cycles and noticed an anomaly. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," Harlan said, showing her the data. "Their brain activity spikes when they enter REM sleep, but it's almost as if something external is influencing their dreams." "You think this could be connected to the location of the clinic?" Dr. Grant asked, her unease growing. There had been rumors, whispered by the local townsfolk, about the land on which the clinic was built, stories of an ancient curse, but she had dismissed them as superstition. Harlan hesitated before answering. "I don't know. but it's not natural. Dr. Grant and Dr. Harlan decided to investigate the land's history. And after digging through archives and consulting local historians, they uncovered a chilling truth. The clinic had been built over the burial site of Pharaoh Akhensoutek, a tyrant who had been buried alive for his heresy against the gods. His tomb had been cursed, sealed so that his vengeful spirit would never rise again. But the curse warned that should his tomb be disturbed, he would reach out through the dreams of the living to reclaim his throne. As they delved deeper, the line between the physical and the metaphysical blurred. Dr. Grant began experiencing dreams of her own, dreams in which she wandered through endless corridors lined with hieroglyphs that whispered of doom. Each night, the dreams brought her closer to the heart of the tomb, and each night, she felt Akhensoutek's presence growing stronger. One night, Dr. Harlan didn't wake up. They found him in his office, slumped over his desk, eyes open but lifeless, as though his soul had been stolen from his body. In his hand was a notebook filled with frenzied sketches of the same figure the patients had described, a man in golden robes with the head of a jackal. As the patients succumbed to their dreams, the clinic descended into chaos. Those who tried to leave found themselves inexplicably drawn back, as if an invisible force compelled them to stay. Some became violent, lashing out at the staff, claiming they were protecting the pharaoh. Others simply fell into a coma, trapped in a never-ending nightmare from which they could not wake. Dr. Grant, now barely sleeping, knew they had to find the tomb beneath the clinic and reseal it before it was too late. With a small group of the remaining staff, she ventured into the clinic's basement, where they discovered an ancient passageway hidden behind a false wall. The passage led them deep beneath the earth, to a chamber that had remained undisturbed for millennia. In the center of the chamber stood Akhensoutek's sarcophagus, the chains that had once bound it now shattered. As Dr. Grant approached, she could hear the whispers growing louder, urging her to open the sarcophagus. Her hands trembled, but she resisted, knowing that doing so would unleash the pharaoh's full power upon the world. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the walls began to crumble. Akhensoutek's spirit, no longer bound by the physical realm, was trying to break free. In a desperate bid to stop the pharaoh, Dr. Grant recited an ancient incantation she had found in Harlan's notes. The words, spoken in a long-dead language, echoed through the chamber, and for a moment, the whispers ceased. But Akhensoutek was too strong. The air grew cold, and the figure from the dreams materialized before them, his jackal mask gleaming in the dim light. His eyes, glowing with an unnatural fire, bore into Dr. Grant's soul. "You cannot stop me," the pharaoh hissed, his voice like the wind across the desert dunes. "I will reign again." With a final surge of strength, Dr. Grant finished the incantation, and the sarcophagus began to glow with an eerie light. The spirit of Akhensoutek howled in rage as it was pulled back into the tomb, the chains reforming around it. The ground stopped shaking, and the chamber fell silent. Dr. Grant collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. The curse had been contained, at least for now. The clinic was abandoned, its halls left to the desert sands. But even as Dr. Grant left the valley for the last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that Akhensoutek's spirit still lingered, waiting for the day when someone else would disturb his eternal slumber. And in the quiet of the night, in the depths of her dreams, she could still hear the whispers. "Pharaoh Akhensoutek will rise again.